So there's a lot of talks about including autistic characters in movies and series, and how important representation in movies and series are. And I think it is important. There's a whole sea of controversy, which is a huge mess. It's a horrible display of what autism is like for the average person. It's very condescending how they treat the characters. It's a savior complex. It does not show the autistic community, which is actually what happens in the real world. It's not a one person saving it. It's the whole community comes together, includes fellow autistic people, with helping autistic people, which is really important. You need to show the autistic community being with the autistic community, which is what they always forget. And it's also inaccessible for a lot of autistic people that it's supposed to be for because of all the flashing colors and everything. The exact people it's supposed to be demonstrating, it's totally just against those people. Beyond totally being against those people, it doesn't include an actor that are autistic, and there's many, many autistic actors, and she just looked at one and said no, and only had this girl, who was not her fault, she was forced into the role, in mind. And she didn't consult us. She promoted harmful ideas and therapies, even though she spent 8 years supposedly researching. Yeah, it's a mess. And then there's a lot better ones online, like by a fully, if you want to see something nice, that a movie fully done by autistic people, neurodivergent and disabled people, and not all of them are of all the categories, and it can be done. Look at Jeremy Vedard. If you want to see another awful representation, look at Scorpion, where they're devoid of emotions, everyone. And they don't. And they all have made light of and made fun of, and totally inaccurate in every way. But I don't think movies will be the solution. I think we should be including movies, yes. But I don't think that's going to ever be a good representation of who we are. And that's because there's a better alternatives that will get to us. Let me go over some of them. One is comedy sketches or short YouTube videos that are more like documentaries or short videos about us. The reason why a short form is so much better in all these cases is a short form. You can put, when you're making a long movie, you have to figure out how to drag up stuff, how to build up stuff. But in a short form, you get to the point, and the point is just the point. There's not too much distraction, there's not much else going on. And it also looks it's a lot more accessible with people low in time. They don't have to go to movie theaters. They can share it around much more quickly. But you really have to get a point. Some of the best slogans or talks or stuff about oppression are short sketches or short talks about them that are very short. And you can look at a bunch of comedians that do it. Like you can look at all the comedians that talk about progressive issues. You can argue how progressive they are, but you can look at Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, Trevor Noah. I don't all agree with these people, but that's what they do. Short sketches on all the issues. You can, but if you want to look at an autistic person, Hannah Gatsby, with some of the short things she said about autism, is so relatable, but it gets much more hard man because you don't have to worry about scenery, you don't have to worry about building up the meetings and all these other unexpected things. You have to get a point. You can look at Key and Peele, the Chappelle Show. If you want to look at like other ones, they make some excellent points and they get people thinking about. And in these short forms, beyond that, you can have comedy sketches with people are a lot more likely to listen to comedy sometimes because comedy is funny, so you get your guard down, and people are more likely to say something funny, and people can talk about more traumatic things when they're funny. I'm not the best at that when I'm nervous. Sometimes it can be funny, but then you have beyond comedy, you have to straight up facts about people talking about their lives in very personal ways, but sort to the point. Now, also in a movie, you have to worry about scenery, you have to worry about all these other things. You spend so much money on it instead of, again, focusing on the freaking point. When you're doing, and then when you have an hour, now when you have the long form, like an hour stand-up by Hannah Gadsby or someone like that, every hour is devoted to making a point, because they don't rely on fancy visuals. They don't rely on fancy things. They're just always talking. And talking gets directly into someone's head. When you're talking, you're saying about your emotions, your thought process. You're speaking about who you are, your identity. When you're making a fancy movie, you show buildings and stuff like that. That doesn't have to do with how your head thinks as much. You're showing a bunch of other things that are up to interpretation, like, why did this character did this? But when you're doing a stand-up or a podcast, also like just a podcast that's long, when you're doing a podcast, there's a lot less interpretation because you're more directly actually saying what you're doing and not worry about all those things. It's also much cheaper, which makes it more accessible, which means you're less likely to spend a lot of money on making it look good and just getting a point. So like the longer forms also work. And then you have comics, which work because they're just so short and straight to the point and they're so accessible. So yes, I do not think these long form movies, even though they can be important part of the problem talk, I don't think they'll get to the real issues. I think it's much more just speeches, short sketches, comedy, also articles where people really speak the words. I forgot we mentioned that, but like articles where people really speak the words. I think that's going to get to really progressive issues. And I think that should be the more focus in expression of who people are. Well, thank you very much. I hope you found this interesting. Please like and subscribe. It really, really helps out the channel. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours watched within a year, so about a little over 10 more months. And if you have any comments, questions, or anything, just leave them in the comments below. And if you know my contact, please DM me. Thank you very much.